Recorded this. Good morning. Welcome to this broadcast on Zoom that was supposed to be on Facebook Live this morning in our Memoir Mentors group. We had technology difficulties, both of us did. So this is what we have. We'll be posting this recording to the Facebook group as soon as it is completed and as soon as we can upload it to the Facebook group. I'm Ann Spry, and I'm here with my good friend and partner, writing partner, Cheri Battrick, and we are here to talk to you today about the afterlife, about spirits. Fittingly, Halloween is this weekend, and so a year ago, Cheri and I did a Zoom together, or maybe it was a Facebook Live together from the cemetery in Auburn, Kansas. And we had a lot of good response to that. So we're going to do a little bit different version of that today. And I'm probably going to let Cheri do most of the talking today because she has a lot to offer. But to get this started, I want to bring your attention to a book that I just got last week called The Afterlife Frequency. It's by a well-known psychic medium and attorney, Mark Anthony. And what Mark is doing in this book is proving scientifically that we can communicate with people who have died. We can talk to our deceased loved ones, and that we shouldn't be afraid of it. And I think that that is what Cheri is also going to talk to us about today. One of the things that's been enlightening for me, and I haven't even read through half of the book yet, but I have friends who have lost a husband or lost a loved one recently, and they are consumed with grief. And there is so much hope that we have in being able to continue to feel their presence and to talk to them, to communicate with them. We just have to be open to that. And one of the really wonderful things that I read in this book, and this was directed at men who are so afraid to show their emotions. They just get so bottled up. They're afraid of crying in front of other people. But what he says here, and there's scientific proof of this, grief tears contain the hormones that cause depression and stress. A good cry will stimulate endorphins. So don't be afraid to let it out, to shed those tears of grief. They are healing, they're cleansing, and very, very necessary. The other thing I wanted to point out that I have read so far in this book is that there is a little rice grain sized gland in our brains called the pineal gland. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but the pineal gland, it is our internal clock. It produces melatonin. It's also instrumental in how we process light. And light is the common denominator between the sun, our perception of the afterlife, and the biophotons in our cells. So that gland is what is in operation when we get a communication from a loved one. So keep that in mind. I'm going to study this more because I'm fascinated by it, and I want to learn more about it. So I'm going to let Cheri talk now, and she has so much to offer about this subject of communication with deceased loved ones. So Cheri, take it away.
Well, I am really happy to be here. And I don't have that book yet, but it sounds like one I need to add to my library.
Definitely.
I have a very dear friend who, like me, has what we call spiritual gifts, to be able to see people who have died and spirits and things. And she talks a lot about the pineal gland. and how important it is that if you want to be having those kinds of experiences and there's some kind of a blockage, or maybe your pineal gland isn't working as well as it could, that there are ways that you can strengthen it. So you might want to Google that, see if there's something that you guys want to do to open yourselves up. I'm hoping that this conversation is not going to be freaky, and I'm hoping that it's not going to be scary. I don't intend it to be. I've had a lot of experiences in my life, starting when I was a little girl, with being able to see people who had passed on beyond the veil. And, it's been interesting through the course of my life. Those experiences have expanded, and I've started to understand that there's more spirits out there than just family members that are deceased that want to communicate with us. And so I wanted to take some time today and just talk about the different kinds of spirits that are out there, the kinds of experiences you might end up having with them, and what to do if somebody shows up and you're not expecting it, so that it can be a meaningful experience and a positive experience. So one of the stories that I felt like I should tell you happened when I was probably about 25 years old, and I was doing some renovation on a friend of mine's home. She had been widowed and was moving to this home and from out of state. And as I was there working one day and the painter was painting and I was masking things, we both smelled the smell of Old Spice. And I asked him, I said, "Are you wearing the Old Spice?" Because that was what a former boyfriend of mine had worn when I was younger. And I recognized the smell and I loved it. And he said, "No, I'm not wearing Old Spice today." And, but he could smell it like I could. And so later I called Margaret and I said to her, "Do you have anybody in your family that wears Old Spice? Because somebody was here today and they were wearing Old Spice." And she immediately knew who it was. She said, "It was my dad. My dad came." And I said, "Well, why do you think your dad would come where you aren't and I am?" And she said, "Because you're working on the house I'm going to live in. And my dad was a handyman. And so he would want to make sure that everything that you guys are doing is done right." And so that's the kind of experiences that we typically have with our deceased family members. They're usually looking in on us, making sure we're okay. We might see them at funerals. If it's their funeral, we might see them up behind the people that are speaking. We might see them up in the air. We might see them. One time I was at a funeral, and the woman who was deceased was walking across the front row, in front of the front row of people who were all her the survivors, and she was bending down and kissing each one of them on the head. And I just thought that was so tender, and what a meaningful experience for her to have. One of the most treasured experiences that I have has to do with my grandma, and I wanted to share that with you because I just think the world of her. I wanted to show you a picture. This is my grandma on her wedding day. I don't know if you can see that very well. With her husband. Her name was Millie. And I knew her as Nana. And when I was a little girl, she lived in Texas. I lived in California, but we went on a trip there one time. And she gave me one of these big buttons that you pin on yourself that are kind of like a political button, but it wasn't political. And it said, "I am a love bug." And then there was this really funny cartoon character of a love bug on the bottom of it. And it was a big white button, probably about this big. Anyway, I have a picture of myself that I couldn't find this morning that I wanted to show you that had me wearing that button. But years later, long after she had passed, I was living in a completely different place and going through some really rough times with health issues and things. And I came into my bedroom to get up on the bed because I was just really not feeling well. And there was something on the floor. And I reached down and I picked it up. And this is what it was. It was let's see if I can get this in the camera. It's a little tiny one of those little button things with the pin on the back. This is a love bug. It's the same little cartoon love bug. Now, there's a lot of ways that my grandma could have communicated that she was watching out for me and that she was there and that she cared about what was happening to me. But there's probably nothing more poignant that she could have done than to deliver that little love bug pin. I don't know the science behind what happened that day. I just know it happened, and it brought me great peace and great comfort at that time. Another ancestor of mine that I absolutely love is this young lady. This is a picture of my, let's see, this is my step great grandmother, Marguerite Steiger. She went by Monty. She was very well known for all of her canning, and which I have that as my one of my hobbies. And she would win blue ribbons at the fair. And every time I pull out my canner, whether I'm doing water bath canning or pressure canning, whether I'm making jelly or jam or cooking chicken or whatever I'm doing, I pretty much know that she's going to check in on me at some point during the day and just kind of make sure that everything's going okay. Monty understands algebra, and I have long since forgotten it. But I remember sitting in her kitchen one day when she was taking a piece of paper, and on a piece of paper she was calculating how many more plums she needed to add to the pot to be able to balance the other fruit that was in there, because she didn't have the exact amount in the recipe and she was using algebra to figure that out. So I think of her when I run out of fruit or I don't have quite enough, and I think, can I do the algebra today? Maybe not. But I know that she's there wishing that I could. So those are kind of some fun family ones. Now, there's also the mischievous spirits, and I would say that mischievous spirits, my experience with that is that mischievous spirits are typically people who have died and they don't realize they've died for whatever reason, whether it was an accidental death or an unwanted death or something else. They just don't grasp that they've gone to the other side. And so they continue living as though they're still here. So, for example, one of the experiences I had when I was working for a restaurant where it was an old Victorian house, and there were many people who had died in the house during the time that it was a house. And there was this one corner of the parlor where we seated people to eat that we always smelled pipe smoke. And we had a non-smoking policy. And so the first time that happened, I went running into the kitchen and I asked the owner, I said, somebody out there is smoking. What do we do? And she said, where's the smoke coming from? Go find out. And so I reported back. It was in this corner. I couldn't see anybody smoking, but I could sure smell the pipe smoke. And she proceeded to tell me who it was that was sitting in that corner as a spirit, smoking his pipe like he had in his easy chair during mortality. So that was kind of an interesting experience for me. And I had many experiences when I worked there, didn't I, Anne?
Yes, you
Anne
did.
and I were working in the same town. We barely knew each other. She knew the place where I was working, though, and I've told her some of the stories that we had there. The spirits that were there, sometimes they would come in at night after the business was closed down, and they would turn on the stereo, or they would go into the butler's pantry and they'd grab the light bulb that was hanging from the ceiling on this cord. It was the kind of light fixture we had, and they would start swinging it, and it would go back and forth. There was a room upstairs where the owners had antique toys, and there were some children spirits in that house, and they would go in and play with the toys. So I was on the call list for the alarm company. Invariably, 2:00 in the morning, the phone would ring and they would say, Cheri, there's a sensor going off in the toy room. And we pretty much knew that the kids were up playing. So it was a very interesting experience to be there. Now, some of those spirits were not happy that we were there, and they were not happy that there were other people in their house, because they could tell that we were there. They could tell that we had turned the house into a restaurant, and they were really angry about it. And so some of those spirits tried to scare us away. I had one that came up behind me and made a horrible sound in my ear, which startled me and caused me to run from the upstairs to the downstairs as quick as I could. And I had another experience where a former owner of the house was standing in the front entryway, and she was just glaring at all of the people in her black morning dress. It was very interesting. So So how did we deal with that? Well, at first we just kind of played with it. We just kind of let whatever they were going to do happen. But eventually, I got to the point where I didn't want to be in that building by myself because I just didn't know what was going to happen. And so I really wanted them gone, but the owners really liked having them around. So I decided to try an experiment. And I share this with you because if you're in a home where you've got spirits that are mischievous, you might want to try this and see if this would work. So this one night I was in my office by myself in the house upstairs. And all of a sudden, a bunch of these people showed up in the hallway right outside my door. And I was working and I could see them. And I was like, oh, great. Here they all are. And I am by myself in this house. And so I just started talking to them as though they were right there, as though we could have a conversation. I was talking aloud and I said to them something like, I know that you're all here and I know that you're really confused about what's going on and you don't understand why there's people in your house that you don't know. And I'm not really sure how best to explain this to you, but I want to ask you to look around you, just look around and see if you can find a light in the distance. And immediately they started looking around like they were looking and they turned and they found it. It was to the southwest of where they were at. And I said, if you can see a light, if you can go in that direction, you will find people there who are teachers who can teach you about what has happened. They can explain to you what's happened way better than I can. Well, immediately they turned and they left. And the next day when I went into work, my boss said to me, where are the ghosts? And I said, excuse me? And she said, they're not here anymore. What happened? And so I sat her down and I explained what had happened. And she said, you invited them to go to the light? And I said, well, to be honest, I really didn't even know. I've read near-death experiences, but I didn't really know for myself whether that was true. But I thought maybe they just need to go to the light. So I told him how to do that. And anyway, it was quite some time before we had anything happen in the house. And when it resumed, it was the children. And they are still there playing with the toys. And I no longer am on the call list for that business. They've shut the business down. But it's a very interesting thing to think about someone having the experience of death and not recognizing that's what's happened. And so if you have that kind of thing going on in your home, you might want to try that. It's a very simple thing you can do yourself. You don't have to call Ghostbusters or an exorcist or anybody else. You can just talk to them and explain to them that if they can see the light, that there are people there who can help them understand what's happened. So that was my experience with that. Now, the last group I don't want to dwell on because they're the least pleasant, and those are the evil spirits. I happen to be one who definitely believes in Satan, and I believe that there are spirits that are satanic that try to hurt us and plague us and interfere with our lives. They might show up in the middle of the night and pin us to our beds. They might decide that they are going to give us a bad nightmare. They might put thoughts in our heads as though they're our own thoughts, encouraging us to commit suicide. They're really, really not the kind of things you want around. And my experience with that is that when they show up, and I know that it's them, because I've learned over time to be able to tell if it's a relative or if it's a mischievous spirit or if it's someone who's really trouble. And I just tell them, in the name of Jesus Christ, I command you to leave this house. And then I don't say another word. And if they persist in staying, I say it again. If they still persist, I go get my husband and we say it together. And eventually they leave. And so we don't have to put up with this kind of stuff if it is unsettling to us or to our children. But we definitely want to be making sure that regardless of what is happening, that we are responding appropriately. So in the realm of family, they typically are here because they're caring about us, right? And so wouldn't it be nice to be able to understand what they're thinking? And I have had the experience of being able to ask them what they're thinking. Do you have a message for me? Is there something you want me to know? And then you can develop over time the ability with this pineal gland becoming more and more active. You can learn how to hear them either mentally or audibly. With the mischievous ones, I've already shared with you what to do with them, and the same with the bad ones. But regardless, make sure that there is a place for these kinds of experiences in your memoir. And that's why we wanted to talk about this today. I think a lot of us think that a memoir should be about everything right now in this world, in our home, in our life that is tangible, that is seeable by anybody else, observable. But there are experiences we have, sacred experiences and special experiences, and also haunting experiences that testify to us that life doesn't end with death. And how important is it for us to record those experiences so that our children and our grandchildren and those who mean a lot to us will know that we know. And that once we're gone and they're reading that memoir, they'll know that we can come back and support them just like we've been supported. So that's what I wanted to share today. I hope that's what you were hoping for, Anne.
It is. It was awesome. Thank you so much, Cheri. And the only thing I would add in summary is to trust your emotions, trust your gut. When you feel like someone is with you, or when you hear something or see something, don't react negatively, or they will stop trying to communicate, because negative energy will block that communication. And take the time to journal your experience. Write it down before you lose the sensations, and try to write about how it made you feel, and just in detail, even sensory details, if there are any. Loved ones do send us smells. That is one thing that they can help us identify who they are. My mother once sent the smell of pine because we went to a niece's wedding in Texas and brought back a pine tree that my brother dug up. And so she wanted me to know she was there because she sent me the smell of pines. So be open. Don't be afraid. There is so much hope, so much love they still have to show us. And so accept it, and don't think that this is a bunch of hocus pocus and that it's anti-religious, because it is not. And the last thing I would say is that quantum physics and science is now starting to prove the existence of the afterlife, the existence of God. So someday we will all have the knowledge that there is life after death. It continues. We're just in a different dimension, but we are energy. We are infinite. So be open, and be open to that love, because that's what the universe was built for. So Cheri and I wish you a good weekend. Happy Halloween. And
Happy All Saints Day.
Happy All Saints Day. We will look forward to being with you again soon. Bye-bye.